Let's talk about anime conventions and nonprofit organizations. When anime conventions first started, most of them were organized by these, they started in colleges most of the time. And so those colleges then eventually transitioned those events to being organized by nonprofit organizations. And so a lot of anime conventions in the early days were organized by nonprofit groups, which means, just a group of nerds comes together and decides, hey, we want to organize an anime convention. And that was going great for a long time until we started noticing kind of the thing that happens when an organization exists for a long time without strong leadership. A lot of those nonprofit conventions started getting taken advantage of, and many of them are defunct today. There was a convention that had gone on for decades in a medium-sized city just about to the northeast of me in Iowa, and that convention, after COVID, shut down because their board wasn't able to keep organizing the convention. And I've been told it's because that board was paying themselves a monthly salary, because as a board member in a nonprofit, you can pay yourself a salary for the work that you do. And so if you say, okay, well, my work is $20 an hour, we're going to dedicate 10 hours a week to working on the convention, well, suddenly you're paying yourself $200 a week, thousands of dollars every month and year. And so the convention money dries up. The issue I have with anime conventions that are nonprofit organizations is when they try to say that makes their convention better. And in some cases it can be true. If you're a nonprofit organization running an anime convention, and if you actually take all the money you get from your attendees, from your exhibitors, and you put it back into the event, and you try your hardest to make a really cool event, then that's exactly what a nonprofit anime convention should do. Or if you take some of that money and put it towards scholarships or whatever community item that your nonprofit cares about, those are really good things, and I really like to see that. But when I started AnimeCon.org, some of the biggest conventions in the cities that we have anime conventions are organized by nonprofits, and I sat there and I did the math, and I was like, okay, well, they're making $1 million a year, but they have 10 guests, and those guests, I spoke to those guests. I'm like, okay, back then, what were you getting paid? What was that convention? If they were paying the guests well in anime, then that's great, because that means us as fans, our money goes into the anime industry, into people actually working on anime, and I would feel really happy about that. But no, the guests were coming for practically free or some small amount, $500, maybe $1,000. They weren't getting first class flights, anything like that. So this convention, and there's a few of them that are like this. These conventions would have 10 voice actors. They'd fly them on budget flights for $400 each. So they spent, $4,000 on flights, $5,000 on hotel rooms for those guests. And then what else did they do with the rest of the money? And I was on the board for one of these organizations, and I had always been wondering kind of what were we doing with the money? What was happening with that extra money? In this organization, it was actually quite nice. They tried to set up a small scholarship, tried to, give that money back to the community, but they had over $200,000 just sitting in their checking account at all times as sort of a backup treasury. But that means they weren't spending that money every year on their convention attendees. So there was $40,000 or $50,000 brought in every year that wasn't being spent on attendees, on entertainment, on stuff that attendees would love, like free soda in the con suite, things like that. And one of these conventions, not the one that I was working for, well, actually, they had the same problem. They used to have something called a con suite, which we have at all AnimeCon.org conventions, and they would give away soda and instant ramen and things like that. And I have never seen a stingier con suite than at these organizations. They would set out 10 boxes of ramen. and say, okay, this is the 3 p.m. allotment of ramen. It'd be gone by 3:05 p.m. And then they'd say, okay, there's no more until 4 p.m. But these are organizations that are taking $100,000 in profit and just keeping it. And what happens is I've noticed a lot of these organizations wasting this money, and it really frustrates me. They have like their own office building where their board of directors get to meet, and they can set up their own special projects and things like that. Some of these would host elaborate dinner, like steak and lobster dinners for all their staff and volunteers, and that's fine and neat, but I personally think those things are very wasteful. That, you know, when it comes to running an anime convention, you should focus first on how can you provide the best possible experience for the attendees. How can you make sure all the vendors make lots of money, all the attendees, you know, pay fair prices for their hotel rooms, for vendor stuff, for everything, and how can you make it just this great experience for everyone, where these organizations were claiming because, oh, we're a nonprofit organization, so obviously all of our money goes to good things. Well, I know some of these organizations pay their directors $20,000 a year. The biggest anime convention in the country pays their executive staff hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they're, you know, a nonprofit organization. So just because an anime convention says it's a nonprofit organization doesn't mean that the people in charge aren't making a lot of money. And I find it really suspicious when some of these organizations, they don't publish who's actually in charge of the convention. So people, you know, hold me accountable for anything that we do wrong. If our conventions, you know, we have long registration lines, if we're out of something, if some guest cancels, it's my responsibility, and, you know, people are able to hold me accountable. Whereas in these board-driven organizations with kind of a faceless board of directors, who knows where all the money is going, who knows who's actually in charge, there's no one to hold accountable when things go wrong, when the convention makes poor decisions, when they cancel their cosplay contest, or when they cancel some event just a few days before the event. And this has happened all the time, and there's just no one to hold accountable in these types of organizations. So I'd really like to see a lot more accountability from other conventions. One thing that I've wanted to do for the longest time at AnimeCon.org is publish our finances, because I keep really good financial records. We track every single expense, every bank account transaction, everything like that is logged, it's categorized. You know, if I spend $2 at Taco Bell on my personal card, that's categorized as personal expenses, and I can't deduct it on my taxes because it's personal expense. So one thing I've always wanted to do is publish our financial numbers. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out quite how to do that yet, because, you know, in there's a lot of stuff like how much we paid certain voice actors or how much we paid certain guests. And, you know, I don't have everyone's permission to publish their personal details of how much they get paid. So I haven't been able to do that yet. But if I'm able to figure out a way where, you know, we can mark certain things like, okay, these things, you know, payment to voice actor obscured or something like that, that would be really cool. Because I think transparency is something that would be valuable to a lot of organizations. I really care about the conventions that I put on and my company and everyone that works for me. And sometimes when there are these nonprofit anime conventions that say they're nonprofits, they could be doing all kinds of shady stuff that we don't know about, because there's really no transparency and no accountability. So I hope you'll join us at one of our AnimeCon.org conventions, and I'd love to see you at Anime Midwest.